Blockchain Brad speaking, and it's great to be part of this community as always in the crypto space. Firstly, I just want to say a massive thank you to Bo. I was watching his post today, or his upload on his YouTube channel, which is called Cryptocurrency Australia, and I was fortunate enough to have to be mentioned in his video. And mate, I just want to say massive thank you for that, because as you do, I try and make sure that I'm providing qualified information. And as not just a fan of Neo, but as someone who is trying to delve into the blockchain technology and understand it, I really appreciate that you value that research, and because at the end of the day, it is my time, and just like most of you guys out there, we've all got families, and yeah, it's a privilege to be part of this space. Today, I wanted to talk specifically about something I was just researching today. What I found is, as I start to go through a bit of research for the day, I often gradually something will come to the fore, and that'll become the theme of the research. And even though initially I didn't understand what that objective was, it became clear that I wanted to find out more about the public versus private blockchain systems. So that's going to be the focus of this post, or this podcast. I am going to try and go through a few things in terms of what I've been looking at, and I'll show you different websites and articles that I found extremely useful. I can't encourage you enough to go and look at these yourself. I have honestly found it to be invaluable. I've also forged really important connections as a result of doing things like this, and I'll allude to some of the people that I've actually contacted via Twitter. Just because it's really good to have if you can't do a face-to-face, at the very least have a tweet-to-tweet. That sets you up with a very personalised connection with really connected people when it comes to blockchain information, understanding, and applications. So starting with the first article today, I wanted to talk about very specifically an article. I'll just go and show you. The title was called "A Portrait of Cryptocurrency World Dominance," and just in the small amount of time I've been researching cryptocurrencies and blockchains, I found that Hacker Noon is quite an invaluable site, and that's just because often they have really comprehensive posts. The reason why I chose this one to talk about is because it's really succinct, and it addresses some key aspects of or that many of us have, key concerns that many of us have with regard to the volatility in the market, the nature of the market, and the propensity to rely on hype. This sort of cuts through a lot of that BS, and it just goes into essentially what's going on, particularly in China. Obviously, the title suggests that there's a world dominance figure. And you can only imagine, based on the focus here, they are alluding to China. I won't go into all the details, but if you want to check it out, I'll just go back up. You can check it out. It was posted on the 7th of September, so I do try and post things or link things that are current, because obviously there's no point in going back months in the past, because things change so rapidly in this space. But yeah, you'll find it also on that website there, networkfights.com. Okay, so the crux that I really wanted to get to was down here. So whilst they were talking about Neo being a front runner, explaining the blockchain a little bit, and providing some background, I have broached some of that in my previous podcasts. What I really wanted to do was use this to start a conversation that's happening right now among many of those in the know with blockchain. And that there is a really big difference between the conversants of blockchain and the speculators in cryptocurrency. I prefer to consider myself an investor in blockchain, because that's the fundament. That's everything I look for. I'm not really just solely about the tech either, and I'm going to explain what I'm talking about and why that is the case for me personally, and what my requisites are for investing. They are not solely just an ICO that looks really promising. That's actually the last thing that I'd look at. Okay, so the question that sort of prompted me to continue on this research was this one here, which says, "So where to?" So I'll just go over this a little bit. The person who posted this, I found really educated about the whole crypto space and blockchain situation that we are able to, I guess, understand in present time. But they raised this about cryptocurrencies and blockchains themselves, and they've explained that they're concerned about the nature of venture capital and how that could impinge on the growth of the public decentralized blockchain. And I personally can understand that. They've also talked about current VC models that are decentralized models that exist now. Things like Union Square Ventures, Sequoia Capital, Founders Fund. There's many others I've actually heard. I think there was Pantera, or don't quote me on these, or it might have been Bencor. But there are several VC, very, very well-funded VC funds out there as a result of people like us who've supplied them with our funds in order for them to then centralize and decide how they're going to expend or isolate those funds into essentially uncertain cryptocurrency markets, because, as you know, ICOs are essentially an idea, and whether or not they're underpinned by, a celebrity, which is a joke, or they're underpinned by quality tech, there is a huge gamble when it comes to those kinds of investments. I'm not saying don't invest in them, but me personally, I go far beyond the ICO, and I also realise that the ICO really just stands for crowdfunding. Okay, so getting back to this, the reason why it is such a valuable piece is that they are raising the question of centralization versus distribution or decentralization. So you can see there in the second part that I've highlighted, the question is, will we be seeing centralized and controlled as opposed to distributed and decentralized? And I'll just go on from that and say blockchain models. Now, that is a massive concern that I personally have. It's something that I've been grappling with ever since I started understanding the functionality or the systems that are blockchains. And once you do delve into that level of depth, which really is important to do if you are going to invest, what happens is you start to see future potential for and future direction for not just the lay investor, but you start to really understand the mindset of larger corporations, enterprise, and most importantly, governments. And I can't stress that part enough, because if you aren't thinking about the movements and the position of government entities, then there is no way that you understand cryptocurrency. You are just a speculator, and you really are just stabbing in the dark, because the number one criterion for me personally, and again, everything I say is not financial advice, it's just my opinion, you must have a sound ecosystem potential when you invest, because you are not going to invest in a fully established and working network, blockchain network at present, because everything's still very not primitive, but everything's still in its formative stage. That doesn't mean you shouldn't invest though in blockchain at all, in my opinion, because there's a lot of reasons and there's a lot of functions that are potentiated from this particular system. But if you're going down the track of trying to make a quick buck, then you are simply a trader of cryptocurrency, and that's a totally different thing. So think about yourself not as a dabbler or a speculator or even a trader, because you aren't. If you're listening to people like me or people like Bo, or you're doing your own research, you'll gradually become it'll be inevitable. You'll become someone who requires better understanding of the blockchain itself and how any particular dApp is going to interlink with that underpinning or platform that is the blockchain. That's an essential part. So big questions coming: to centralize or not centralize. Okay, so talking about my next post, I actually wanted to show you a post I found from Vitalik in 2014. I can't actually find it at the moment, but I have posted on my Twitter, so check it out there. But basically what I found from Vitalik Buterin, which is right here, you can see he's mentioned, is that I found a post that Vitalik had said that the functionality and the potential of the private blockchain was very was was endless. In that what Vitalik was saying was that there was huge benefits to establishing a private blockchain, and I posted this on Twitter with a what the F, because I was thinking to myself, why do you have this ideological, highly technical genius who is Vitalik Buterin suggesting that the private blockchain has some sort of merit? It seemed to be counterintuitive, and it seemed to contradict the very premise for he writing the Ethereum blockchain. But then I started trying to understand perhaps his reasoning, and it does make sense to a degree from the realist perspective. And I mean, I don't regard Vitalik as a realist. I regard him as a programmer, a very, very savvy and intelligent one. But he's certainly not he's not business savvy by any means, in my opinion, like someone like Da. But for him to go out and say, there's benefits to private blockchain, it did surprise me, and I wanted to know more. So this site here by Mojix, and if you don't know what Mojix is, you definitely research them, because that links directly with what I'm talking about with private blockchain. But basically, I found this site really good because what it did was it tried to assert or explain the differences between the public and the private blockchain in a wider world. And it gave some really key points as to what the differences were. One of the major things I wanted to talk about, without just reading all through this for you, you can certainly go to this website. So check it out. You can see here it's by mojix.com. I need to also probably provide a disclaimer here. Mojix would have they would be partial to the private blockchain in their writings, I would imagine, because they represent that sector. But let's just talk about some of the key points here. Obviously, they explain that often the private and the public blockchains are confused, and there's some key aspects to both. One of the big draw cards for the public blockchain is the anonymity that it offers. We all know from the very initial public blockchain that is Bitcoin, we all know that was the draw card for most people for many years. There's a huge shift happening from the tech that Bitcoin offers, and there's a lot we've learned only because of it functioning for the time it has. But one of the draw cards was its anonymity, and that remains somewhat, to an extent, a draw card. But I will we'll just add that for me personally, it's not. For me, I actually do want to see not just digital assets and smart contracts, but I want to see work in the identity sector as well, because if you don't do that, I strongly believe that there's going to be a crackdown on illegitimate or questionable practices that can be certainly motivated by not so much malicious users, but those who have malintent when it comes to tax avoidance, money laundering, etc. So I just want to qualify what I'm talking about and what I'm looking for. But yeah, that doesn't mean that the public blockchain can't offer key features that can work in sync with the private blockchain. So subsequent to Ethereum and Vitalik winning this major award in 2014 for his work in the initial phase of Ethereum blockchain protocol writing, what's happened is there's been an establishment of consortiums and that have decided to try and join unite their business models together so that they can become a powerful force in the blockchain era. That is great, but when it becomes difficult is working out how that's going to fit with the public sector and the public use of blockchains, because on the one hand you may want to centralize so that you can protect the interests of your immediate company, but where does that leave the lay investor or the small investor? And to help me better understand that, today I was researching Walmart, IBM and Microsoft. And what I learned was that IBM are and I'm going to show you some links in a moment, but IBM are a major player in the private blockchain sector in America, and they're much farther ahead than I thought they were when it comes to real-world applications. And it's definitely worth having a look at some of the things that they have published and that other people have published to educate about their progressions in IBM's contractual connections with Walmart and how they are progressing as as interagencies or as as collaborators for in the blockchain movement. Really interesting and concerning only in the sense that if you're someone who's invested in a coin like I'm trying to think what it's called. There's a coin out there that's becoming really popular and it's rising in value right now. It's called Walton. It is actually the antithesis, in a sense, in its objective to the centralized blockchain for chain supply or supply chains rather. So we're talking about, as I said, Walmart and other and like companies, and these are major players. They're specifically designed to offer or to establish a complete complete oversight of their whole product from beginning to end, and that's what the blockchain offers. But from their position, they want to make sure that it's all in-house. So in-house is solely, as locking it up behind closed doors, and there's no question in my mind that that's exactly what banks and governments are also considering doing. I've looked into China quite heavily, and I have a lot more research to do, but there's no doubt in my mind that they are also doing the same, not only with their banks, but also with their government. They're looking at fiat-based digital currencies. There's publications already coming out about that. They're also looking into the prospect of their own bank-issued digital currencies and blockchains. And I'll just stop there and say I genuinely don't know what blockchain that is. I'm hoping and praying that NEO are an inherent component of their development and their plan, but again, I don't know. I don't believe that China have the tech behind them that even comes close to NEO in terms of blockchain. And that's important because, yes, they can certainly establish cryptocurrency initiatives that support government regulation and government control. But I don't believe that there's anyone within the system, unless they've been absconding this for many years, that has the potential to provide a blockchain to the degree that NEO as a very comprehensive, robust ecosystem already has. That's fundamentally why I think there's going to be a direct relationship, a business relationship, and I guess hyper connected. Not so much that, but why there's going to be reciprocity and open communication between on-chain and the broader government sector in China. So, just moving on, I found that this was great because it just talks about why the advantages of the private blockchain over the public one, and it's important you know this because this is what's coming, whether we like it or not. And even though we're holding on to the idea that we just want to keep everything decentralized, we have to start thinking much more realistically, and we have to apply our understanding of cryptocurrencies and blockchain generally to real-world applications, because that is where how it will be sustained in the real world. It has to be applicable and relevant to business, or it will not survive. It will actually, for sure, be rejected by governments if it's counterintuitive or if it challenges the status quo. So, here are some of the key points. It's rule changing, it has known validators, it has cheap transactions, it's well-connected nodes, and it's privacy. With the validators, as you guys would know, the validation process is very different to the proof of work. In the proof of work, there is not the same process. I've mentioned this in a previous post, so I won't go into that. But the validation is is virtualized, meaning that you don't have to have all of the other bullshit. It's gone. You don't have to have the dramas and the risks associated with mining. It's purely based on the node validation and consensus in it that's modeled in a different way. On that note, it is also important to know that the consensus methodologies, or the consensus protocols, I should say, of the best blockchains that I'm looking at, they are moving on from the POS models. And if you're interested in following like blockchains with the best potential for asserting their dominance in a major space like a country, you should be looking at those kind of protocols beyond the POS model. Okay, so and just want to also say that Ethereum is doing that, so don't discount Ethereum. They are moving on from the POS model. Even though they're currently implementing that, they are also looking at a DPoS model in the near future, as is Bitcoin, but I'm not a fan of what they're doing. Okay, so the next thing is it's cheaper transactions. It is definitely the case. It's certainly cheaper, and they also reward you with the way in which they set these up. Then there's they're well-connected nodes, so they can be trusted, and faults can be manually fixed pretty rapidly. But you can go and check all this out. I don't want to bore you by just rehashing what they have to say. So privacy is another really cool thing. And I mentioned this before in the beginning of my talk. A lot of people want to have this like idealized anonymous state. And I think Roger Ver was talking about the idea of buying some land and everyone just living in harmony. It's some sort of idea of a crypto utopia. But in all honesty, privacy is a concern for a lot of people. And what private blockchain does afford is it tightens up the permissions of the blockchain itself. And I've previously talked about this trustless / trust environment, and understanding what they mean. Well, if we want to talk of it that way, basically a private blockchain, they are good for institutions and for anybody who wants to protect a particular interest. But if you want to, function in a very open structure, then the public domain would be much better. And there are absolutely there's a valid space for both of these, and they can work in sync. And they are going to work in sync, starting from China and moving to South Korea and onwards. There's no question of that if you go into enough research. But check out what they have to say about privacy here. Me personally, I like digital identities. I like the focus that the best ecosystems that are around at the moment. I like the way that they address the issue of privacy and how they protect your identity. But also validate that the government's position and because their argument is that you need to have some sort of way in which to interact with the government, interact in this space under the laws of that government. And one of those requisites, no doubt, is having access to some degree of identification. That is really key. And I know that's not going to be favourable to a lot of people, but it's just, in my opinion, it's important. Okay, so I just want to keep going, talk about a few other things. So yeah, check out this site. Thanks, Jim Donaldson, Director of Corporate Communications at Mojix. And if you want to know more about Mojix, definitely check them out. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about in this discussion about public versus private blockchain is this article, and obviously I like talking about NEO, but this article goes from 8btc.com. It just basically, it was posted today. It just talks about the relationship, or the alleged relationship, between Da Hongfei and China. And if you listen to Bo from Cryptocurrency Australia, he was alluding to this when he talked about it briefly. But I have to say, I'm not a fan of all the hype. I feel sorry for Da Hongfei that he sort of gets branded with this, this connection with the government. But if you listen to enough of his interviews, he pretty much is consistent with, in his statements to say that yes, he's had discussions with them from the outset. He was prepared right from the outset. I even found articles that suggested that he was an initiator of contact with them pre-ICO crash or pre-ICO ban. I read an article that to the effect that he was also a proponent for the ICO ban itself because it was going to be advantageous to the whole ecosystem. Whatever the case, I truly don't care. I don't care about the veracity of those statements. What I do care about is the fact that Da Hongfei is using an open source model that appeases a government that is a communist government that is capable and ripe for the picking when it comes to a technology like blockchain. Da is aware of the potential. I heard him say recently in a video that he felt that China was going to lead the way in blockchain technology in the entire world. With someone like Da, he's traveled a bit. He knows the scene, the blockchain scene around the world. He knows the crypto scene around the world. And he is certainly savvy enough to understand the climate in China. So for that reason, I just wanted to raise this because their argument in this article was that, Neo with Ethereum as equating Neo with Ethereum as platform goes international. Everyone's jumping on the bandwagon that somehow because of these connections and all this media being hyped up about his connections with the government, somehow, this was to suggest that there was a direct connection between the government and Neo, and that is actually not the case. I haven't read that anywhere in a lot of the research I've done. In fact, I have read the opposite, and there's a lot more interactions happening between on-chain, which is the enterprise or consortium blockchain that I think it's called an ICO, or no, not ICO, but correct me, guys. It's like a CEO, okay? And he is that. He holds that position both in on-chain and in Neo, and he is always very cautious in most of, well, certainly in all the ones I've heard him speak of. When he discusses on-chain, he always puts in the disclaimer that they are different entities, and they are his words. And there's a reason for that. He doesn't want to establish false hope, and that's what happened today. People jumped on the bandwagon of this interconnection, and then they went, yep, this is awesome, China are going to adopt it, or we better just go and buy a heap of Neo. Now, there's nothing wrong with buying a Neo. There's no problem with that. But in my opinion, part of the reason for this price hike and was actually the Korean stock markets adopting Neo in their exchanges. That's massive, and if anyone understands the Korean market and they understand Korean consumers, they'll know that that is going to drive price far more than the suggestive comments or the questionable interpretations of Da Hongfei's interviews, which is essentially what's going on. But anyway, check this out, because the main point, the value of me talking about this with you is that there's definitely more at play and more at stake than we know when it comes to Da, his team, the government, and on-chain. I've talked previously about NeoX, and a lot of people, don't know about NeoX, and the small amount that I know is very exciting because it is specifically designed and it's in the white paper, but it's specifically designed to provide a link between the two agencies, between the two entities, between the two blockchains, the private and the public blockchain, to facilitate consumption, to facilitate enterprise, and just to bolster the entire ecosystem. So we need to cut the bullshit out and just understand that the private and the public sector, with the example of Neo provided already in a real world application, can be really great. We don't necessarily have to worry. However, I am going to present a few arguments that are definitely worth raising, because some people are very strongly on one side of this fence of either they're very pro-private or they're very anti-private, and they definitely have valid reasons. So let's have a look at some of those. On Neo, there was an excellent post submitted by OpenSea Crypto, and I really liked it. There was a question that was raised, and it was, does on-chain's private projects help Neo? That is really important to have a conversation about. If you're an investor in Neo, you should know this shit, because on-chain is, again, that privatized and consortium-based blockchain that has been built from the ground up by Da Hongfei and his team, by Eric. And if you know anything about Eric, Eric knows his shit as well when it comes to programming. They are not going away. Also, on-chain are at the grassroots. They are on literally. They're seeking a lot of smart contract support. They're seeking governmental support. I know this because I was translating some of the Chinese stuff recently that I found. I don't know where I found it. And this is current, only a few days ago. They were actually meeting up with different smart contract developers, and they were hosting a couple of night sessions where they were getting different people from Shanghai and other places around the world, I think, but mainly Shanghai, and they were just sort of just getting ideas together to sort of work out what the future might be for some smart contracts on the on-chain blockchain. So this question is really relevant because of that. And I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but I just like this shit. So on-chain, the goal, it says here, is to build a web of private, which is the DNA. I didn't say that before. I've said it in previous podcasts. DNA is the bloodline, or it's the protocol that underpins on-chain. That is massively important because that's how Da distinguishes the two and how he can validate his legal position, I suppose, if it ever came down to it. It's important that Da did this, if you think about it, because what it meant for him is that if ever the government cracks down on the public blockchain because of its decentralized structure, which is typically not something that's favorable to a government like China, he's always had the on-chain to fall back on. There's reasons why I don't believe that will happen, because it's not designed to work in isolation. On-chain is not, but it's certainly something to think about. So it says here that on-chain's goal is to build a web of DNA and public blockchains connected and cross-compatible via NeoX. So that cross-compatibility is important. I've talked about that before, and it's interoperability. So it's going to become more apparent as the functionalities of NeoX are implemented, and there's going to be news coming from Neo about that, I'm sure. So keep track and become more versed in NeoX and its other functionalities. So the system is built for the current economy as well as new technologies that will emerge. On-chain is working on a private blockchain. On-chain working on private blockchains helps Neo as well because we need them to work bilaterally in order for us to transition to a smart economy. Couldn't agree more. The whole premise of Neo is a smart economy, and they give you a hint just in that title. They are not trying to set up a standalone system of decentrality without the reliance and the weight of an enterprise and the backing of a government. It would be just stupid. And to be honest, these guys are far from that. They know their shit when it comes to building an ecosystem. And there's another one that's coming that is, in many ways, Neo's sister. I've talked about this before. People need to get on the bandwagon with ecosystems because that is what I invest in. If you don't have the whole ecosystem that's evolving into something that is going to be embedded in a real world space, and that real world space has to be, we're talking mainstream adoption, and what's the freaking point of investing in an ICO? So this person goes on to state that the reason why they're involved in Neo is because of these things we're talking about. And they make a very valid point that it says here they can't have everything on a public blockchain, including digital identities, private businesses, and government. Well, that's actually not necessarily the case. You can. And that's what Neo does. They are, if you look deeply into their roadmap, they are doing those three things, but they are doing that in sync with that last piece of information, which is the private businesses and government, and that is where that person's right. where OpenSea Crypto's got it spot on, is that you can't have a private businesses and government inclusion into a decentralized model that doesn't include them. So this is why this dual approach is so revolutionary, and why I'm a huge proponent of it. Because if you're not a proponent of this, then you're a proponent of what Vitalik initially broached, which was the benefits of the private blockchain itself. And why would I be a proponent of something that I'm excluded from? I wouldn't. Okay, so moving on. Check out the comments; they're really educational. I just wanted to, raise this article. It was fantastic. The next thing I want to talk about, as I said, I was checking out what was happening in China, and this is just to provide evidence that it is going on. On the 13th of September, again, I don't speak Chinese, and I don't understand much Chinese. I speak Japanese, so I could understand a little bit. But what I did notice here was that there were night sessions going on for, I think, 3 or 4 nights. You can sort of tell from the boxes there. There were a few night sessions where there was discussions of smart contracts happening. But this was an on-chain initiative. However, if you look carefully on the site, NEO is constantly referenced, and as I looked through this particular one, I noticed that NEO was frequently referenced by a lot of people. So not only is it just a sort of semantic, or not only is it a theoretic, like a protocol-based link that we read about in white papers, it's actually happening in the real world, and this is sort of why I thought it was relevant. I wanted to give Bo another plug. I was watching his article today on Crypto News, and he really provides quality information. This site here, this post about NEO was unreal. It really piqued my interest about some other things I wanted to know. But just generally, he provides really good insights into pretty much everything from current day news to key issues that might be cropping up in the crypto space. So definitely have a look at what Bo has to say through Cryptocurrency Australia. Okay, moving on. I wanted to try and back up a few things of what I'm saying by just going through mentioning 2 people. Well, 2 of them are Bridget McDermott. She is a VP for IBM, for the VP for the IBM blockchain, and then there is. Let me see if I've got it here. Have I posted it? I'm sorry, I might have got rid of it. But I had an article that was that represented the other VP, and it was basically a YouTube about him. And I wanted to use them both because I didn't realize until I started delving into the private blockchain sector just how much work they'd done. So this site comes from it's a SlideShare from slideshare.net, and yeah, I think the title, if you type in this, emerging applications of blockchain for supply chains, I only thought this was valuable because this provides real world evidence of what is going on in the West in terms of research and applications of private blockchains. It is happening right now. It's happening in a big way, and there's lots of money being thrown at it. We just don't know it because it's not ICO relevant. This is coming from from venture capitalists and from people like Microsoft, companies like Microsoft, major players like IBM. They are transforming the way in which private companies are functioning as blockchain technology emerges. So rest assured that is going. Well, I don't know if it's a case of being rest assured. It might actually incite or provoke some sort of concern, but my objective is not to do that. It's just to show you that this is really happening. We have to try and grapple with how does that fit with the decentralized model that we're all part of. In my opinion, it's messy in the West, and it's going to continue to be so until there's a really clear ecosystem that evolves that is modeled much like the way in which NEO and another one is emerging. At present, I'm really not a fan of the way it's playing out because there's been way too many ICOs done. It's diluted the value of Ethereum. There's a lot of baseless smart contracts that are being accepted, and no doubt this is a concern of Vitalik as well, because it's really affecting the reputation of Ethereum as a whole. But you have your opinion about that. I just want to illuminate some of the applications of the private smart blockchain, and IBM and Microsoft are certainly doing some big things. Okay, I wanted to finish off today with two things. I'm going to finish off with the very best post I have ever read. I have to admit, it's the very best post I've read on Neo, anywhere. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think Bo mentioned it in one of his posts from Cryptocurrency Australia. But I shit you not, this is worth looking at. It's posted by Bexka 2006, and I've actually reached out and contacted this person, and there's no doubt that they are in the know when it comes to Neo with regard to its value as a public/private enterprise, and it talks about that. So I read it. I must have read it 2 or 3 times. I thought it was one of the best essays or mini essays I found on the blockchain itself. And when you read this, it'll go through all the points as to why it is such a good investment. I'm just going to really quickly touch on them, but I would honestly encourage anyone who has a little bit of time to go and find this post. It's on Reddit, in the Neo, I don't know what you call it, in the Neo subreddit section. It's called Reassuring Inexperience, Why is Neo Still the #1 investment in crypto? Now, this person's really direct, far more direct than even the way I tend to write, but I agree with all their points. The first one they say is that the first argument for Neo is the fact that it's a share. Now, a lot of people don't get that Neo is not a cryptocurrency in its fundamental structure and design. I'll just repeat that. Neo is not a cryptocurrency. You don't have a cryptocurrency hot stake when you buy Neo. What it is actually a security, and it's very different to Ethereum for that reason. Ethereum functions as a fuel for their entire ecosystem that is still, far from developed. But Neo, because of gas, the Neo itself functions as a share, and you have voting rights thanks to gas. So don't think of it quite in the same vein as most of the cryptocurrencies out there, because this is quite different in its design, and it means that you have a much greater position when you invest in Neo as a company, even though it's public and it's an open source and decentralized blockchain. You have a genuine stake in it, and their protocols support that. So they run on what's called a distributed Byzantine fault tolerance protocol, and that is actually far more reaching than the proof of stake, and that's why there is this capability for the interoperability and interaction between the public and the private blockchains as well. So that also, because that enfranchises the NeoX and blah blah blah. So I agree with the first point, really good. Second point is that it's vastly connected to the first, in that Neo shares are indivisible. This is huge. It is massive because 2 reasons. You can't break down, I've said this before, but it's worth hearing again, you can't break a Neo down when it comes to your investment position, and most importantly, there are only 100 million out there. So that sounds like a lot, and it's nothing. When you consider that that Ethereum is capless, which I do not like, the fact that there's only 100 million is really great. And then when you factor in the 5% loss from misplaced private keys, that diminishes it even further. And then from that, it says here, in the following years, a single Neo could be worth thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, provided that technology develops as planned. And that is very possible. I mean, I'm not one of these people who like to hype up things. I actually can't stand it, but there is every possibility that it could, provided that everything goes well with the integration with the government. There's every chance that this particular security could increase in value significantly, simply because there is going to be a finite amount of it, and there's going to be a lot of people as it grows wanting to access this security. So again, it's a share. Now, it's a finite share. There's no more being made. So the best way I can sort of exemplify this or provide an analogy is actually through Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, if you go on and research his shareholdings, to go and buy one is some ridiculous amount. I think it's like 270k. Oh, I'm probably wrong, but it's some ridiculous amount. And when I first heard of the prices of Ethereum's projections, I thought that's insane. No one's ever going to pay that. And I thought about Bitcoin, and no one's ever going to pay that. But actually, that's all bullshit, because if people are willing to pay for 270k per share for one of the world's best investors, why wouldn't they go and invest several thousand in a very functioning ecosystem that is what NEO is evolving to become? So I'm not saying jump on for that reason, but I'm saying from a realist position, not an optimist. There's every chance that this coin is going to rise in value rapidly, and it's a finite resource. Okay, number 3. It says that Ethereum is so tech-focused that sometimes it loses its way. Well, totally agree. I've listened enough to Joseph Poon and to Vitalik Buterin to know that there's no one that knows their shit better when it comes to blockchain than them. I mean, I would argue that even Craig Wright, who I do actually think there's every chance that he is Satoshi. I've listened to a lot of his talks, and he does speak speaks fluent blockchain, and he speaks fluent Bitcoin. I don't care if he is Satoshi or not, to be honest. I mean, he has N-Chain, he's sold it for 300 million, he knows his shit as well. But all 3 guys are very tech focused. They were in Craig Wright was in security, so whether it be Bitcoin or Ethereum, all of them come from tech savvy backgrounds, or from programming backgrounds. And that is, while that's great and essential, you have to also have a business component to your model, because essentially it's got to have some sort of uptake in the real world. And that's where Dark is so crucial, and that's what this third point's about, is if you haven't got the counterpart for Eric to interact in the real world, you've just got a Vitalik who's struggling to do it. And to be honest, if Vitalik had someone like Dar from the outset, just imagine what Ethereum would have done. It wouldn't have done it anywhere near like this. It wouldn't have been manipulated to the way it has. It wouldn't have had the mining issues that it does. And now they're backpedaling, trying to fix all these problems. And what's cool is that NEO doesn't have to do that, because it's had the privilege of learning from Ethereum. Number 4, it talks about how OnChain is a company that is backed by Fosun Investments. Well, just like another major player coming in this space, it has essential backing from the private sector, and that's where they lay some of their reliance on the ICO. And even though NEO did have that ICO, that was only because they did want to establish the distinctions between the 2 entities. They could have certainly used the funds if they wanted to, but Fosun is a real deal player in Chinese markets. We're talking, billions of dollars in holdings. They don't make irrational or emotional investments, and if they're investing hundreds of millions in, which is what has quoted to be in OnChain, then it's something to pay attention to. Obviously, if I could invest in OnChain tomorrow, I would. Who wouldn't? Because it's the most secure of the 2 options of NEO and OnChain in terms of viability and sustained growth. But that being said, the more you look into NEO, and that's what I'll be doing, I want to understand more and more about the interconnections and how there's a symbiotic relationship. There's symmetry, there's a connectivity or an interconnected purpose and function for both of them, and a reliance on each other to work in the ecosystem. So, absolutely, valid point that financial backing is there, and Fosun, put it this way: if you're one of the major players in the private sector, you are going to have links with the government. You are going to trying to espouse mainstream adoption of this particular thing, and if it's designed with with Neo in mind, then the point speaks for itself. And also, given the fact that the market's been so bad, and there's been so much bad press for recent initiatives from the government, and reactions to the ICOs, then in my opinion, they've weathered their first storm. And that was really just a test to see, what direction the government will take. And we still don't know which way they're going to go. But the best thing we can do is research to better understand the technology and what it can provide for people and for governments. And NEO seems to be able to support a government. Okay, so last one, it says the only concern for NEO, and this is really important, I've sort of been talking about it now, is that the Chinese government will halt their efforts by strict regulations. And when this was written, I think there's been already progressions or actions from the government to, suggest that it's not, whether they are going to be strict or not, it's not so much that they're going to halt things, even though that's the language of the day. What I think is going to happen is that they are going to halt certain aspects of blockchain, or certain businesses more so. They're going to be really just vetting a lot of ICO, not ICO-like businesses that append to the blockchain. They're going to certainly vet and eliminate blockchain threats, because there were like 18 blockchains that had merged in China, and because NEO was at the forefront, they weren't even on the list, and Da said that himself. So I don't think that they're going to halt NEO. I'm pretty optimistic about that. I wouldn't have put my money into NEO if I didn't think so. And I only invest in blockchain. I don't give a shit about ICOs unless they are related directly to a blockchain. And even then, I will research the shit out of the blockchain as well. So, yeah, 5 is a really valid point, but it's gradually diminishing in its weight as we come to understand more of the relationships. And as you guys know, there was some hype that was released even today that Bo from Cryptocurrency mentioned as well. So we don't take them lightly, but again, I try to look through that. Often it's written from baseless sources, or from questionable sources. So again, rambling, but this article I want to frame as one of the first pieces of information that I found to be really succinct, got to the point. And didn't need to convince me. I knew this stuff, but it's great to see that there's other people who are willing to go to the depth that I like to go to understand the blockchain. Okay, the reason why I want to talk about these briefly is just to provide some information about, again, some private initiatives. ConsenSys, which is linked to Ethereum. One of the CEOs, I think it was, of Ethereum is directly linked with the ConsenSys. They have a blockchain fund that they are providing startups with. You definitely need to know about this because they're doing some really cool stuff with the money. And one of those things, I'll just want to go across here, check out this as well. This is the one. So Omega One, I have only just started researching this, but out of respect for you guys, I just want to show you some of the things I'm looking at. I don't have a huge list of prospective investments at the moment, but I just like the ones that pique my interest. I just want to show you. So Omega One, it is really interesting because it's all about trying to decentralize, or more, trying to, how can I explain it, decentralize trading, in the sense that what they're trying to do is provide you with the very best price as you trade your cryptocurrencies. And they can do that by buying small pieces of it from around the world in different exchanges. And why that's beneficial to you is because it's cheap, and if it's cheap for you, then it's likely to be a popular thing, provided that cryptocurrencies continue to flourish. So it's built. The other thing, as you guys know, I look for blockchain backers, or I look for a really solid foundation behind an ICO, or I don't even like to use that word, but behind a business, because that's really what ICOs should be representing. And this particular business is founded by the ConsenSys team, and the ConsenSys team is highly credible in my opinion. Yes, they do run on the Ethereum blockchain, but in my opinion, that's not an issue. They are moving to a DPoS model later anyway, but as long as it's not on the Bitcoin blockchain, I'm fine with that. So that's just one I would encourage people to look at. They haven't yet released their ICO. I'm not sure if I'm going to invest in the ICO or not. I don't know enough about it, but I've only ever invested in one ICO anyway. I like to sort of invest in the live market afterwards, but sometimes I'm new to this. I really don't know. I read their white paper, really interesting. So there it is there. I mean, look at their team. It's unreal. Amazing team. And then down here, Joseph Lubin. He was the co-founder of Ethereum. He's a consensus founder. Need I say more? He isn't God, but this guy here is someone to start paying attention to. His name is Alan Keegan. I listened to him today. He is one smart dude. He knows his shit when it comes to the business of Omega One. He knows the market, and there's a lot of money that's been thrown into the mission to get Omega One running already. So check it out. The other one I was looking at, and this is the only one more I wanted to talk about, was ADDX. ADDX apparently, and for anyone who wants to correct me, please do so, but my understanding is that it's going to be adopted by the Neo blockchain as well as the Ethereum blockchain. Whether it's adopted only by one, that's fine with me as well. But the fact that this is an ad-based blockchain DApp it says here that it's actually a blockchain, but anyway, it's piqued my interest enough to raise right now. It's something that I've written down even in my little list of things that I need to research more, and I would encourage you to go and look further into ADDX. Okay guys, this is a post that's way too long, and I'm going to cop a lot of flack from it from you guys, but thank you so much if you have listened to even part of what I have had to say. I hope it's helpful to you. My objective is not to provide you with financial advice, but just to provide you with something that piques your interest, or maybe it prompts you to look into blockchain further, because my name is Brad, but I've called myself Blockchain Brad for a reason. I am pro-blockchain. I am pro-blockchain research. I believe that is the key criterion for any kind of investment in cryptocurrency, and I would encourage you to look further into blockchain as well. Okay, that's it for me, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.